Welcome to the launch of the British Society of Gerontology Special Interest Group on Aging, Business and Society. We're really delighted that so many of you come here today to join us and share your views, to learn more about our exciting agenda and programme of events and workshops that the SIG are planning and how you can get involved. This afternoon, we're going to hear from a range of longevity leaders who are passionate about partnerships and believe that by working together, this special interest group is uniquely placed to enable the WHO Decade of Healthy Aging, support business to better understand the needs of older and aging people, and empower social gerontologists to work effectively with and within business. We're going to explore those topics today, and helping us to address them, we have an all-star cast of experts and leaders from across the healthcare ecosystem. So let me introduce them. Alison Benzimra, Foundation Manager at Willie Foundation for Aging Well, and a leader at the BSG herself who will work on the ERA Committee. Paul Clarkson, Senior Lecturer in Care, Social Care at the University of Manchester. Gemma Mooland, Senior Innovation Manager at the Centre for Aging Better. Tim Shakespeare, Research Acceleration Lead at Zinc. George McGuinness, Challenge Director for Healthy Aging at UK Research and Innovation. Debbie Keeling, Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for Knowledge Exchange at the University of Sussex. Eric Kilstrom, Chairman of Sensor Robotics and until recently, Interim Director of the Healthy Aging Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. Tina Woods, Founder and CEO, Collider Health and Chief Exec of Business for Health, CIC. Mario Barbagallo, Professor Mario Barbagallo, Head of the Geriatric Unit at the University Hospital Palermo and European Regional President for the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics. Natalie Elmet, Lead for Communications and Advocacy at Homestead UK. Susan Weil-Schwartz, Expert and Communication Leader at the Global Coalition for Aging. Dr. Ian Phelp, Founder of Aged Care Technologies and the Chair of our newly formed Special Interest Group on Aging, Business and Society. And last but not least, Jemima Kelly, columnist at the Financial Times. I'm sorry for garbling, Jemima Kelly, columnist at the Financial Times. So before we move, I'd like to just go through a little bit of housekeeping. The meeting is being recorded. So just to let everybody know that the recording is made for posterity, that we'd like people to turn their microphones off throughout the meeting and also their screens to maintain the broadband. But please do type any questions or comments that you have into Zoom because we're really keen to make this discursive and there'll be plenty of time set aside for discussions throughout this session. And until then, maybe just to sort of say, we love emoticons. So if you do like what you're hearing, if you don't like what you're hearing, please share with your creativity on the emoticons that are provided by Zoom. So there is a vital need to build deep connectivity and engagement between gerontology, business and public policy communities that can benefit society. The SIG on Aging, Business and Society will forge that connection by generating a constructive dialogue that is outcome focused among social gerontologists, business and third sector leaders. The SIG on Aging, Business and Society will become a nexus point where productive programs and partnerships that harness the power of gerontology to inform and educate society will be developed and executed and evaluated to help prepare us in society and business for the democratic challenges and opportunities ahead. So within that in mind, let me take you through the agenda today. Paul, Alison, Gemma and Tim will be talking to us about empowering social gerontology to work effectively with and within business. George, Debbie, Eric and Tina will talk to us to explore supporting business to better understand older and aging people. And Mario, Natalie and Susan will help us understand the importance and opportunity of enabling the WHO decade for healthy aging. And then we'd like to invite our chairman of the SIG to speak and reflect on what the conversation has been so far, and to engage in a dialogue with Jemima Kelly, columnist at the Financial Times. During that session, there'll be an open plenary as well, and we invite questions. And throughout each of the sessions, there will be open plenary. So with that in mind, let us start. Could I invite Paul and Alison and Gemma and Tim?
Hi, Paul. Pardon me, sorry, Rob. Thank you so much for those introductions, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Alison Ben-Zimra, and I've worked in aging for many years. And one thing I really enjoy about working in aging is I can have conversations with anyone, irrespective of race, gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. And that's because either you or somebody you know has or will be affected by aging. And this is a really exciting space to work in, not only within academic research, but also within business. So for the Special Interest Group, I represent the BSG Emerging Researchers in Aging Committee. And we are committed to supporting capacity building for our members. But the thing that we've realized in engaging with our members is that not many people can say, when I grow up, I want to be a gerontologist. So I think that most of our members actually identify with being accidental gerontologists. And I think this highlights the broadness of aging. So we have a diversity of disciplines within the social sciences as our members. So when we engage with our members, we're also seeing an increased interest in alternative academic careers. And I think this in one part represents the precarity of aging in academia, but also that as the ecosystem of innovation increases, there is recognition that research plays a pivotal role within addressing societal challenges. So what are the opportunities for researchers? Well, gerontologists can translate their findings into a real-world setting. This will enable their research to transition beyond just project and be ongoing. And ultimately, if it can be structured around a business model that is feasible and financially sustainable, it leads to scale and to impact. But there are challenges. So gerontologists don't necessarily have the business nor entrepreneurial skills necessary. So either they need to be mentored or they need to be partnered with collaborators who have those necessary skill sets. I think the other challenge is that gerontologists don't necessarily want to run their own enterprise. So if we could strengthen the long-term strategic relationships within academia and business, but also develop job opportunities within the private sector to attract gerontologists with those specific skill sets within the aging market. I think the discussion today and also this week with Longevity Week highlights the economic attraction of the healthy aging sector. And I think that social gerontologists definitely bring a fresh perspective, particularly with regards to the lived experiences of older people. And that's an attractive proposition to businesses because products and services that are designed to be inclusive and accessible for older people makes business sense. So what's really great about the Special Interest Group is seeing the strength of a network and relationships. So with regards to our initiatives at ERA, we welcome anyone to come and join our G&T sessions, which are informal discussions around introductory concepts to gerontology. Tim from Zinc will be chatting about initiatives that Zinc are doing. And then we're also in discussions with Judith Phillips, who is the research director of UKRI's Healthy Aging Grand Challenge, of how we can strengthen the relationships between academia and business. Paul, I hand over to you.
Thanks, Alison. Hi, folks. I'm just going to pick up on point by point some of the things Alison has told you about there, about us and about how business can work with social gerontologists and the other way around, how social gerontologists can work with business in partnership. So I come to our SIG from a slightly different space than Alison. I'm an applied researcher, particularly in social care, which is the space where aging research meets applied research. And I represent one of the main funders of applied research in England, which is the NIHR, National Institute for Health Research. Don't worry about the health research tag. It now includes social care, but not many social researchers, social gerontologists know about that. So one of my sort of passions, one of my tasks is to raise capacity in this area of applied research with that research funder, because that research funder has a lot of capacity building initiatives currently nationally through things like our School for Social Care Research, which is a national part of NIHR, raising capacity for social care research in England. And this is a space where social gerontologists could find a home, I think. And traditionally, I've been a researcher too, attending BSG conferences, for example, where that funder is not fully known to people, I don't think, to social gerontologists. They normally go through the sort of UKRI, ESRC route for projects, to fund projects. But it's just to let you know that there's an opportunity there. NIHR are very keen on including business personnel and businesses within research funding and enabling researchers to connect with business and vice versa, businesses to connect with research in this aging, longevity, aging research space. So there's a lot of opportunities there. So that's where I come to the SIG. And like Alison said, normally people don't think, well, I'll do social gerontology as an occupation research, because people come to it from different directions. This research funder, NIHR, is traditionally not known to researchers like ourselves, because we come to it from perhaps outside of medicine, which is where NIHR has been sitting for many, many years. But it's only recently, the past 5 years or so, that there's a concerted effort to get social care and aging research and long-term care research into that NIHR funded space. So we do span many disciplines, and we are quite a disparate sort of bunch of researchers and academic investigators. But I think that's a good bedrock in which to focus attention on how can we make research more applied and in the real world, and addressing inequalities amongst the aging population. I think that's where partnerships with business might help. So business can help with impact as well, in terms of the challenges. Alison talked about the challenges in including businesses in our research. Business can help with the impact of your research, and a lot of funders now, particularly the NIHR, are concerned about this gap between academic findings and impact in the real world, and businesses can definitely help with that and help you secure partnerships that can be useful for your research. And it's useful for business as well to get their products sort of out there and evaluated. So as Alison said, researchers don't necessarily want to be business people and run their own enterprises, but they can benefit from engaging with business, I think, and businesses can help them. Funding models for research grants particularly are increasingly requesting that external businesses and external organisations are part of your project team. So there's an opportunity there, a natural opportunity rather than a challenge for social gerontologists to get involved with businesses. So how can the SIG help with that? I think the economic benefits of the healthy aging sector are very, very important. And in terms of researchers like ourselves, I think the first question research application reviewers ask of us or I'm aware of that, is does this product or project start from where the person is, the older person is? So there's an alignment of incentives there, I think, for business partnership. We have to highlight the economic benefits of working with business, but also that as researchers, we do shine that light on the lived experience of older people and what their preferences are for certain forms of help and care in terms of how businesses can help with that. So helping to guide you in terms of what businesses are available and what business leaders are interested in connecting with research and how we can connect researchers with businesses is a good place to start, I think, because it aligns both those incentives, both the economic incentive of business and the lived experience, sort of explicating the preferences of older people from the kind of bottom up in terms of research. It sort of aligns those two incentives that we each part of the space occupies. So Alison's already mentioned how people can get involved with the SIG, and I think we're going on to that later, Alison, aren't we, with other discussions, and particularly Ian Phillips going together towards the end. That's it for me.
Lovely. So I think then it's on to me. So hi, everyone. I'm Gemma. I'm a Senior Innovation and Change Manager at the Centre for Ageing Better. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are an organisation that uses evidence to bring about change in policy and practice to improve all of our experiences of later life. And my particular role in our organisation is spending quite a lot of time thinking about all of this research and evidence that we either gather or synthesise, working very closely with the gerontologists and wider academic community to do so. It's thinking about how can we actually apply that in the real world. And as part of that job, quite a lot of my time is spent actually talking to businesses, innovators, entrepreneurs, funders, about who are looking at to the academic community and going, how can I engage with this amazing world of evidence, you know, the brilliant minds that sit within the academic community? What's my way in? And so I thought what might be helpful is actually just to share some of the themes and some of the challenges that come up from the business perspective, engaging with the academic community, in the hope that that gives us, I guess, some pointers as to how we might go about better supporting social gerontologists to work effectively within business. So a few of these themes that come up, one of which is certainly around communications. So we often find businesses saying, I feel like I'm speaking a completely different language to the academic community. You know, I don't understand some of the concepts and the ways of thinking. You know, significance is, I always love that one as an example. It has very different meaning dependent on whether you're an academic or not. And, you know, likewise, that the research community might not also be as always bought in or understanding of some of the concepts, you know, B2C, B2B, what on earth does that mean to me? So there's definitely an issue around language that I think that could be addressed. There's an interesting one that comes up around sort of conflicting values and ideals. I don't know how much of that is perspective rather than reality, but a sense that, you know, the academic community and the business community might be after slightly different things. But I think that really comes to a head with certain issues such as intellectual property, where we see a conflict where the business community, you know, have commercial interests in intellectual property and more of a protective view of the knowledge and insights that are gathered through pieces of work, whereas from the academic community, we tend to be erring more on the side of open access and sharing. Another issue that often comes up in my conversations is also, and to be honest with you, that's why most people end up coming to me in the conversations that I have, is where do I go to? Who do I speak to? What's the right person? What's the right discipline? Who's the best university to be supporting me, or academic institution in this work? And that sort of lack of understanding as to how to best navigate the academic community and get those excellent minds and resources in their business going forward. So I think there's a lot of different things that we could be doing to overcome these barriers. Alison's already spoken to some of them. Certainly work to help educate researchers on how to talk the language of business and also translate the more technical academic concepts in plain English, and vice versa for the business community. I think there's lots that could be done around providing processes and guidance for overcoming some of those knotty issues such as IP. I think that's a really good example of also where there's actually probably quite a lot of good practice out there within the academic community. I'm sure NIHR have got lots of stuff on that pool. I know others such as Plymouth University have been doing work in this space. So really understanding where have we already got some good stuff going on in the academic community that we could help spread more widely to really help the wider social gerontology community to engage with business effectively. And then maybe there's other things we can do about thinking of innovative ways to make the front door into academia more accessible for business. You know, how do we make ourselves easier for the business community to identify and engage with? Because there is a demand out there from the business side as well as there is from the researcher side. So lots of different ways in which you can do that in practice. Placements, roles in business, support and teaching programs. Tim, who I'm going to hand over to shortly, will talk to one such very interesting approach that Zinc takes. And I also think there's a really important role for the special interest group in this, which I will come to shortly. I think Paul and Alison have made very clear the opportunities for better engagement between the research community and business. I think actually that there are some challenges that also do need to be addressed. So of all those solutions and all those great things that we could do to better support social gerontologists to work in business, there are some limitations, I think, that structurally exist in the way in which those partnerships work at the moment. So I think there could be, you know, a real role for more longer term strategic partnerships between business and community that allow for that real meeting of minds between those two communities. Quite often we see more piecemeal, kind of small scale, short term, project by project partnerships, and that is pretty much driven entirely by the funding landscape. So there's some big asks about how we rethink the funding structures that are available to enable those longer term, more strategic partnerships where I think we could get the most meaningful impact out of engaging researchers in business. So in terms of the role of the special interest group, I guess from my perspective, I'm always really clear that we really keen that we don't reinvent the wheel. I think there's lots of good practice out there about supporting researchers to work with business. So let's flesh out what is that best practice. Let's identify it. Let's share it. Let's also use the collective wisdom of this group to come up with solutions such as how do we make it easier for people to navigate the world of social gerontology and access the brilliant minds and will within it. And I also think there's a really important role in highlighting where there are those more structural barriers such as funding and representing the needs of the research community and their needs around partnering more effectively with business in bringing those changes about. So that was a sort of quite a high level discussion, I guess, of some of the opportunities, barriers and role of the special interest group. But now over to Tim, who I think is going to bring us to a really nice concrete example of how this can work in practice.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Thanks for inviting me to be here today. It's great to talk to you. And I think it's a really interesting topic that we're talking on. So I'm from Zinc. I'm the Research Acceleration Lead. I've been there for about a year. Before that, I was a dementia researcher for 10 years. And at Zinc, we back exceptional talent to build new commercial solutions that solve the most pressing societal issues. And so we tend to be working at the startup or scale-up end, rather than, for example, with multinational businesses or like multinational commercial businesses. So at the kind of earlier stage of commercial development. We've been around since 2017, and we do this for like 3 social missions. So one is improving quality of later life, another's mental health, and another's job opportunities in left behind places. And we continue to have these missions core to everything that Zinc does. And on this later life mission, there are 2 key programs that we've run. So the first is our Venture Builder, where we bring people together from all walks of life, including researchers, but also entrepreneurs, creatives, tech experts, to create new businesses from scratch together and form commercial startups. And the second is our Catalyst program, which is delivered in partnership with UKRI, where Zinc provides a program of support to researchers within universities to do something very different to what they normally would do with a research grant, which is to completely focus on building a new product or service and finding a sustainable and scalable way to bring that product surface into life and to reach as many people as possible. And so I think when it comes to thinking about how we support researchers to succeed in business, one really interesting thing for us is sitting at this intersection between startups and the research and academic world, and to look at all the different opportunities we can find to engage those groups with each other. And so, for example, that can be by a researcher joining the Catalyst program and experiencing the program support that Zinc offers, where we can link them into our wider networks with startups so they can be influenced by those ways of thinking. but also through creating kind of taster opportunities. So we have a program, a PhD placement program starting at the moment, where people who are doing PhDs can get a year or a few months at Zinc working with startups that we work with. Or even kind of all-in opportunities where researchers can jump in and join a venture builder program and start something completely new from scratch and kind of leave academia and try something very different. So I think one way to support researchers is to have a number of different options of ways that they can be engaged, and then have that clearly described them so they can see those different options. So I think often we talk about kind of engaging with industry, and people might think that means one thing. They might think it means something to do with IP. They might think it means kind of doing consulting, for example. And those are all options, but there's lots of different options. I think having that wide variety of different ways people can get involved is really helpful and healthy, so that people can see what's the right place for them and what's the most efficient, or yeah, what works best for them. So as I mentioned, for those who are staying in university, we run this program support for the Catalyst Awards, and we do something quite different for that. And we focus on supporting an entrepreneurial approach with researchers. And so for me, that means on one hand, a kind of entrepreneurial mindset. So things like starting with a problem, not starting with a solution, working towards an ambitious vision, and setting out clear steps towards scaling and sustaining, create something that will have a life of its own beyond the university walls. But then also using entrepreneurial approaches. And I think when you shift the focus of a grant from creating research knowledge to creating products and services, a whole range of different kind of tools become really relevant. And those are tools that we see used all the time in the startup world, have been tested and tried there as effective ways to build new innovations. And so it's supporting researchers to use those tools that have been developed in a different world, but are actually often very scientific. They're about hypothesis testing in a fast and iterative way. So I think it's really interesting things there to support researchers to see what's happening in the startup space and see which of those tools can be really useful for them to build products and services in the way they want to. I think another part of supporting researchers, we talk about kind of succeeding in business. What succeeding in business means for each researcher will be different. And so through the Catalyst Awards, for example, we support researchers to think about what role do they want to have. Do they want to be the CEO of a new company that leads development of a new innovation that they can implement and be in charge of that whole process? Do they want to be an advisor that supports giving advice from their research expertise? Do they want to have a partnership with someone who's working in a startup where they do some research that supports that startup and helps that startup explore really important research questions? So there's a number of different options there, and I think there's a lot we can do to help researchers think about what do they want to get from engaging with business, what are the ways that are truest to what they want to achieve that we can support them to do. Another way that we support people through the Catalyst Awards is by making the application process itself very different to a standard application process, where in that process we can share some of this learning that we've got through working with startups about what makes a successful way to start building a product or service, and give researchers some of those insights right from the start without even having to commit to doing and to taking this on themselves. They can start to get a taster and see if it's right for them. So I think that's a number of ways that kind of we think about how we can support researchers. We talk about kind of what the key challenges and opportunities. I think the opportunity here is a really big one, a really exciting one as a former researcher myself. It's to free up researchers to do the work they're really passionate about and help them find their role in bringing the benefits of research to life for people who are living in an aging society right now. I think that's a huge opportunity and we should be making the most of that. I think there can be a challenge for researchers who are working within the university environment, who have certain incentives and culture and a lot of time demands on them from the academic system. And for them, it's around helping them to find what is the role that they can play within the confines of what they want to do, or do they want to be looking to move into a different role in order to have the impact that they want to have. And so just finally, a few thoughts about kind of what the special interest group can do. I think it'd be really helpful to demonstrate some of the range of roles researchers can take, share great examples of people who have done this and who are doing this and making their research work in different ways. And there are lots of ways that people can get involved. So through Zinc, by finding out, we have some workshops coming up in December and January. You can find out more about the Catalyst Awards and see the approach that we're taking through those. And also by getting involved and kind of sharing opportunities getting involved in PhD placements and that side of things as well. But on the Catalyst side of things, that's a project, we've got 22 new projects that have just recently started in September. And Alison is involved in one of the Catalyst research projects. I was going to tell you a little bit about a specific example of a Catalyst project.
Thanks, Tim. What's really great about this project is it kind of demonstrates how these type of webinars and engagement sessions can actually lead to a project. So Tim and I met at the beginning of 2021, and I manage a research foundation for a housing charity for older people with limited means. And through that engagement, I discovered the Catalyst Awards. So the Whiteley Foundation has partnered with researchers from the University of Surrey, and we put an application into the Catalyst Awards, and it was successful. And it's a digital storytelling game that will increase social connections and reminiscing. What's really nice about the project is that it's been designed around accessibility, but the business model is what is driving that. The other great thing about this, and particularly coming from a community organization, is that the older people themselves are involved in the designing of the product. So what was initially a user-centered design has now definitely become a community-centered design, and that is off the back of co-producing with older people. So a really great example of how these kind of initiatives can lead to positive outcomes. Thanks, Rob. You're on mute, Rob.
You're still on mute.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, what I was going to say was we have a couple of questions coming in, so I'm going to go to those in a minute. But just as we go there, could you tell us a little bit about the image that you selected and what it's there to represent?
So we chose this image because I think what often happens is, particularly in a research project and with design, often you have many ideas, but they all crumpled into one kind of jumbled mess. And that through the relationships between academia and business, that jumbled kind of ideation can be clearly defined and actually lead to a product and actually have direction.
That came across very strongly in the presentation, actually. I think one of the things that I noted was that there was a lot of conversation about conflicting values and ideals, and actually a lot of solution-based conversation around connections and exchange. And I know that the best practice was mentioned a few times as well in that. Does the panel want to talk a little bit about what seems like a divide of language?
Could I just add quickly before that, Rob, that myself and Alison did talk a lot about our image, getting it right, didn't we, Alison? And I think that crumpled up bit of paper also reflects the system to work together with business, research and business together in partnership. The actual systems are a bit crumpled up, and we thought if we can offer advice and pointers in the right direction, we could change that crumpled up little bit of paper to a little sort of arrow going somewhere in terms of the metaphorical sort of partnerships going forward. So that sort of expresses it, I think. I just thought I'd add that because it sort of drove us on to some of our questions that we're asking ourselves and how the special interest group could help.
Great. So I actually have a question from the audience, from Wendy, and it says, Alison, could you say a little bit more about what your business trading model is? And then we have a comment from Simon who says, I just wonder how the AHSNs fit in when they have a core area of interest in aging well. So I'll put those two comments, stroke questions over to you.
So I'll answer Wendy's question first, and then I'll offer the other question up to the other panelists. What's great about the Catalyst Awards is that it's definitely a focus on a prototype. So there's not necessarily a business model that we're working to, it's unfolding. What has been interesting in this design stage that we're in is what we thought was the end user actually is not the end user. And I think that resonates with what Tim is saying, is it falling in love with the problem and not the solution? So stay tuned. It will unfold in due course. Rob, you're on mute.
Apologies. Any other comments from the panelists or questions from the audience at this point, or can we move to the next session? Okay, well, listen, Alison, Paul, Gemma, Tim, thank you so much for your contributions on this today. It's been really wonderful to listen to. So moving to the next session, I'm just going to move my slides along. We wanted to invite George and Debbie and Eric and Tina to explore supporting business to better understand older people and aging.
Thanks, Rob. Tina's going to kick off with thought leadership.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. So yes, so thank you. Should I start now? Excellent. So thank you so much for involving me today. I'm really pleased to be here on this panel with you all. And so I thought about this thought leadership. I mean, I think obviously the role of business is so important, and sort of wearing my various hats, I've been hugely involved in this, and I'll come on to that in a second. But I think business potentially could have such a huge role, not just in supporting the health of our populations just generally across the life course, but of course from a sheer might of sort of marketing and customer facing and distribution and perspective, just have potentially so much role in addressing some of the cultural issues around how we see aging. So I think what I really wanted to sort of, I guess, focus on is, you know, this whole question that I know was posed initially. I mean, why would businesses want to engage in this agenda? And I think, you know, we know that there's a massive social imperative, but actually there's a massive commercial imperative. And really what I would like to say is that they go hand in hand. So we know that there's a significant market potential. I mean, we don't have to go over this again in terms of the growing aging demographic, but of course they also have, you know, most of the household wealth. And if you add, you know, up all this disposable income around the world, you know, the plus 50 population, you know, some calculations have said we'd create a country, you know, in the GDP, the size, you know, third in size after China and the US. So it is gigantic. And of course, with the aging demographic, we have fewer younger people. So of course, you know, employers are just going to have to get with the program and support, you know, an aging workforce, keep them healthy and well so they can maintain and work. We know that the dropout from the labor market that does tend to happen in the poorer and more disadvantaged communities, they're just, you know, it is poor health that actually is creating a lot of the situation. And we know from other countries like in Japan and Singapore, they've realized, and of course they've had to address this because of the sheer staggering numbers of older people, that they have to get with the program and have been very busy supporting their older workforces. And of course, culturally have always seen aging with a different type of viewpoint. And, you know, they venerate age and wisdom. So now over here on this side, you know, we have, you know, very different aspirations, also the baby boomers and Generation X. I mean, I was born in 1964, and I know my aspirations, I mean, we all have aspirations as human beings, but I think we do have different expectations than, for example, you know, the post-war generation, of course, you know, my own parents and my in-laws, and we actually are quite, you know, sort of the whole kind of focus on eco-awareness and climate change agenda. I mean, you know, in fact, the plus 50s are actually more aware than our younger population. So. And with that, and I, you know, moving on to, I guess, some of the challenges and opportunities and why leadership is so important, we need to change this cultural position that we have, you know, from a passive kind of position to a much more proactive model of health and care. We need to disrupt these negative notions of growing old and growing older, and we need almost like a new lexicon for longevity, as I call it. And we need real transformation investment, and with that, a long-term approach into really disrupting, I guess, the status quo. And with that, and I'll come on to in a second, I have a particular interest in how data and innovation could help break down some of those silos. So just a brief word on the opportunities. I think we know, and this is a term that I know Andrew Scott, for example, who many of you will know, he talks about how aging is very malleable, and we're starting to hear a little bit more around biological age versus chronological age. So I think, knowing how important our health is, especially coming out of the pandemic, and how poor our health is, and actually how much we do need to address this. A lot of my thinking at the moment, and I wanted to put this forward in this session around the role of business, is how can we bring health into ESG mandates? So this, and very briefly, I will just mention a little bit of the work that I've been doing. Some of you may know, wearing my Business for Health hat, we published a business framework for health called Supporting Businesses and Employers in Their Role to Enhance the Level of Health of the Nation, which was Chris Whitty, our CMO, he wrote the forward, and we've been working with the CBI, and essentially the case that we put forward is that health is the foundation for well-being and economic growth, supporting our aging workforce, for example. We know that health is completely linked to our wealth, and that the health of populations is such a critical factor in improving our productivity, as we age, and as part of this, reducing health inequalities is such a fundamental part of this. And of course, going back to aging is malleable, we also know there's a vast discrepancy in healthy life expectancy between the poorest and richest citizens. Sajid Javid in his Blackpool speech, you can't level up the economy without leveling up health. So this is some of the work that we're doing for Business for Health. We're looking at developing almost like an index over the course of a 2-year program, looking at 3 parameters: direct impact on the business influence on workforce health, and of course the aging workforce is a huge focus of that. We have our secondary impact of business in terms of their products and services. We know unhealthy food is a big factor in ill health, but we know, for example, in the aging community, keeping active, whether it's physically, but also emotionally and socially, are so important. And of course, the external influence of business on communities. So working with the CBI, we know that that the role of business could actually reduce the impact on health and social care by 10 to 20% through interventions, for example, in musculoskeletal, but also in areas like mental health. So we are very keen, and many of you will have heard of the new Office for Health Improvement, the disparities, who are taking and looking at across government's approach to this and across society approach to this to create a healthier nation. And they recognize that business has a huge role to play. So I think with that, what we should do is harness the might of business, get them involved, really incentivize them. Hopefully this business framework, this index that I mentioned earlier, will be a tool to do that, working with government in terms of mobilizing, the right levers and policy initiatives, but to really look at, how we can do more. Obviously, we've got integrated care systems coming through. We've got ideas like business as an anchor institution, local communities, working with local authorities, local NHS. I think there's a massive opportunity to kind of bring this approach of business, get health into ESG investing, so we get that long-term investment. And really facilitate getting business as part of that systemic change we need to see to improve the health of our older populations. And just today, and I'll just close with this, we published the Open Life Data Framework, which the CBI have also been involving their members in, and of course has been a big project from the APPG for Longevity, which I've been very involved with. That is really looking at other models like open banking, for example, to really look at the data across our lives, bring this in, make it easier to share private sector data with public data, bring down some of the silos, and really start to encourage much greater collaboration to really develop the fantastic products and services and get mobilized the might of business in an ethical, trustworthy way, and make a huge difference. So I'll stop there, but hopefully that plants a seed for some of the ideas that are currently sort of bouncing around quite a lot of different sectors.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I think what we're going to do is I'll make a brief statement, and then we'll get more into a panel discussion rather than talk at you. We'll kind of go back and forth amongst the panelists. And the question that I was asked to discuss was around the challenges and opportunities around adopting some of the ideas that Tina was talking about. And in particular, I think there was a comment about culture. For me, a lot of the opportunity is culture catching up with the science. We're living longer, but we're not treating it like an opportunity, and it only becomes a problem if we don't treat it as an opportunity. And I think there's a couple of ways of looking at that. Tina touched on it a little bit there when you talked about the consumer side of it, but also the employment side of it. Someone's tapping. I'm wondering if someone could go on the mute, who's ever tapping. So if they're, just a point on the consumer side, the people over 50 represent 54% of all high street spend. If you include all of that, it's something like 8, depending on which report you refer to, it's 8 to 15 trillion globally. The economy of the population that Tina was talking about, the GDP is top 5. So significant opportunity, but it has to be framed that way. And so I don't know, Debbie, if you wanted to come in and comment on that a little bit.
Thanks so much, Tina and Eric. One of the things I'd really like to emphasize is that thought leadership comes from older people, older age groups, particularly, for example, if you think about older entrepreneurs, not just in their ability to create goods and services, but also they have, there's evidence to support, quite a bit of evidence to support that they're actually more successful than younger entrepreneurs. But also they obviously mentor younger entrepreneurs, they act as role models. So I think that side of things is often not talked about, and I think you're very right to raise that it's a positive frame that we're looking for, as opposed to the more negative frame that we typically do here in a lot of dialogue.
George, can we bring you in, comment on that quickly?
Yeah, well, actually, I sort of feel the urge to sort of generate a couple of other sort of things that also feed off Tina. So from a business perspective, why engage? And I think Debbie's just gives some really good examples of the specifics, but you sit down and you say, well, isn't this something that my marketing department should be doing for me anyway? And I'd say yes. And have you ever asked the marketing department what capability that they have to answer those questions? And if you ask that second question, you suddenly find that they know absolutely nothing. So then you ask, so what difference would it make to my business? And you've been talking about all sorts of possibilities, and Tina's quite rightly saying that we're really keen to change business behaviours on the sort of corporate social responsibility or ESG agenda. But I think we're already seeing in some of the Trailblazer projects that we fund that mainstream projects can make mainstream business by delivering really good goods and services to older people and people as they age, so not necessarily very old people, and in particular to markets where people actually aren't high value individuals, don't have a lot of disposable income. So there is value for the businesses in there. And then I'll just say one last point, which is again from my experience, and thank you to Alison for. I was going to steal the quote from Zinc about falling in love with the problem. Well, that's what gerontologists can do for you, to really get to understand. So instead of selling something that you think that you're going to repurpose and push a solution that someone doesn't know, really stop, get to know the problem. And that then converts into access into the sort of funding that my organizations can give out. Because whether it's a researcher or a big business or anyone in between, we see all the time what look like good ideas, but we ask, why didn't you ask a gerontologist actually how to frame this? So you're using ageist language to pitch to me. You're making ageist assumptions about what people want, etc. Why didn't you bring a gerontologist into your team to actually really understand? And I think that's the case we're trying to make with business. Sorry, I've gone on too long now.
Yeah, no, well, George, I wanted to follow up on that because one of the things that I didn't get in my section was the opportunity around employment. You were talking about, the team, the marketing team, and they're not particularly, again, going back to Gemma, who's throwing a lot of gems into the conversation, particularly around language. But, I was reading somewhere that in the US, 30 million people left the labor workforce during the pandemic over the last 2 years. And a lot of them are not coming back. There were 5 million jobs available and they can't fill them. 5 million jobs less than there were when the pandemic happened, and they can't fill them. And so I think some people are going to be forced, some organizations are going to be forced to catch up with the science and overcome some of that ageist thinking.
Yeah, and I think it's a really sad reflection that in the world of the 100-year life and in the technicalities of defined contribution pensions, an awful lot of people make premature decisions and are going to end up in poverty in later life, and that's a tragic circumstance. But actually, that 5 million or whatever it was, maybe also includes a load of people who have stepped back from work to care for others, and so there are real business opportunities to help them, to tap back into them by thinking about how flexible your workforce practices are. So how can businesses adapt to a different workforce with actually greater diversity? Age is the one diversity that has been forgotten through the last 2 years. But how do you take advantage of all that rich talent? And I think that really good question, Eric.
I know some more. Oh, sorry, Debbie, go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things that we four have previously discussed as well is that engaging across the generations, and that you tend, by using a certain label, certain terminologies, you tend to fragment the market, whereas actually the opportunities are there along the life course as opposed to with specific age groups, for example.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Tina, go ahead.
No, I think the whole language thing is so interesting, and I personally, from my own perspective, I think labels have been so harmful. And if you ask most young people, they don't use labels in the same way that tends to enter into lots of these conferences, And I just think, I would love to be able to see this in a way that is very much about us as people, and we don't change as fundamentally as individuals as we age. And this term, our older self, is quite an interesting one. And I just think, it'd be really, really nice to move away from, all these labels. I mean, that we tend to give, all these different age groups. Yes, of course, our needs do change, but as people. And I think if we really stick to the argument that we're all people, that we live in communities, and most of the time when I speak to younger people, they really don't see these labels, that we insist on using.
I think that's important. I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is going back to the labor workforce issue. I mean, some of the people want to come back, may require to go back into the workforce because of income, whether they've saved enough or property hasn't developed as much as they had. And some organizations are deliberately hiring older people for their soft skills, their ability to talk to people in an empathetic way, understand, have the experience in certain things that a younger organization might have. So there are a number of skills in an older workforce that can be appreciated more. So I think there is an opportunity to open up wider questions. Do I see? Yeah, so please type in any questions into the chat session there, and we'd be more than happy to jump on them.
I just thought I'd jump in as well, Eric. One of the questions I had was just like with the last panel, but could you tell us a little bit about the zeitgeist behind the image that you chose?
You first.
You first.
Well, actually, George found this image. I loved it when I saw it. I think it conveys all sorts of different types of experiences, different concepts, looking at it, and I think it's also an incredibly positive image around how we look at a group of people that traditionally have been seen in much more negative or stigmatized viewpoints.
I liked this image because, frankly, it can be interpreted a million different ways. You know, this could be a couple that's been together for 50 years or met on some dating app last week. Maybe they're going to see grandkids. Maybe they're school friends from a long time ago. There's any number of ways to interpret this. And I think the way you interpret it really tells you a lot about sort of, you know, your perspective on growing older.
And a big shout out to the Centre for Aging Better for generating a license-free library of age-friendly images that can be used. So, you know, my own organisation, I think have got much better in the last 12 months, but would normally have crinkly hands to demonstrate something about aging. And we're trying to convey something much more positive and very different from that sort of medical frailty that is so often used as the badge.
We have a hands up from one of our panelists, Alison.
It's just kind of leading on from what George was saying about EDI. I was recently in New York and experiencing firsthand the job shortages in restaurants because of their being understaffed. But leading from that, my brother works for a very large corporate bank, and he was saying to me, you know, what strides he's making with regards to hiring women and people of color. And I really pushed him with regards to age diversity. And you could tell he kind of had to think about this. And he said to me a few days later, but surely I need to get older people out of my company so that the younger people can come in. How do you address that kind of thinking?
No, I'm going to sort of push the conversation on a little bit and sort of think about what can we do as a special interest group together, and how do we catalyze these things. And Debbie and I are sort of thinking that we would plan a workshop in February. There'll be a little bit more about that at the end. And we're really trying to sort of tap into you and your sort of thoughts and expertise about how can we get gerontologists and business working together for mutual benefit. And actually, we've got quite a good starting point. We think there's some really good examples out there of work going on. So Tim's been on from Zinc, they're partners for ours with the Catalyst program, beginning to do that, but more generally, the Aspect program. What's that all about? It's partly because the whole university innovation ecosystem is set up for STEM. You even have technology transfer offices who when we've sent people to say you need to get your university to sign up, know absolutely nothing about what to do with arts, humanities, and social sciences. And so one, that there's that, how do you get more impact from your research? And how do you convert that into a business? But actually, much more importantly, is that conversation we've been having. Maybe, you know, one, what is the capability of business and how can we raise that? And are there some good examples of where that is? And are there actually alternative career paths? So that's another thing that we're seeing from some of our researchers, that actually some people want to move to this 100-year life idea of a multi-stage life, where actually academia was great, but actually I now want to go and pursue something else. I'd really like to be embedded as a gerontologist and bring my experience somewhere else, but with the option of coming back into academia at some later stage and enhance that sort of understanding of the impact that I was having, etc. So how can we sort of help generate a new movement and a new market is I think the focus of our workshop. So Rob, you've got your finger up, so I think that's probably telling me I'm coming to an end.
Yeah, you have about 1 minute left, I think. So if there's a wrap-up comment, that would be great. But just to say, you're getting fabulous engagement on the chat here, and a great comment, particularly around the remarks about older people having to leave the market. for younger people, and what a myth that is.
Let me throw an idea. George, one of the things that the Office of Life Sciences did with the Future of an Aging Population was publish all of the evidence behind the report. That's a treasure trove of research. Is something like that going to evolve either here or the community of practice with your UKRI?
Well, good question. Firstly, I should give Debbie a bit of thing. So we've got communities of practice within the challenge. Debbie, you've got your community of practice as well. So do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Eric. I think the whole idea, obviously, of the SIG and particularly the area we're working with is really to keep that knowledge exchange going. And the point's already been made and about how there is, there's existing good practice, there are existing good reservoirs of expertise and knowledge, and the communities of practice are a really good way of accelerating that. But also what we want to do is make sure that they're all aligned. So, our workshop, ensuring that we take that forward to the World Congress on Aging, for example, but then joining up the different communities of practice and almost as a bit of a hub and spoke, so that we can really draw on the place expertise as well as the national and the international stage as well.
And just to reinforce that the program, the Healthy Aging Challenge, will come to an end at some stage. So trying to find a home that actually maintains and refreshes, etc. That might be the Centre for Aging Better, that might be all sorts of other people, but we know that firstly trying to create those communities is the first and best way to get the value of those sort of resources recognised.
Well, Debbie, George, Eric, Tina, thank you so much for such an excellent, inspiring session. And if it's okay, we'll move to the next panel.
Thank you so much.
So I'm really pleased to invite Mario, Natalie, and Susan to join us to explore how we might enable the WHO Decade for Healthy Aging.
Great, thank you, Rob, and hello, everybody. I saw a couple of late joiners to the session, so I thought I would quickly recap on some introductions for everybody before we kickstart the session. So hello, nice to meet you all virtually. My name's Natalie Elmett, and I am the Communications and Advocacy Manager for Home Instead. We are the world's largest provider of in-home and domiciliary care services operating in 16 countries. I am joined by Professor Mario Barbagallo, the European President of the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And Susan Schwartz, the Director of Communications for the Global Coalition on Aging. And our work stream is focused on how this special interest group can support the decade of healthy aging to make a meaningful societal impact. And with that, I think I will be handing over to Professor Barbagallo to set some context around the action areas and sustainable development goals set forth in the decade for healthy aging.
Hi, Natalie. Hi, Rob. Welcome to everyone. Now, I just want to remind what's EAGG. EAGG is the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics, and actually all the Gerontology Society of Europe are part of EAGG. So I mean, even all the members of British Geriatric Society are members of EAGG. And why so important? Because EAGG also is representative at the UN and WHO. You see a picture of UN. And EAGG was one of the promoters of the decade of healthy aging. What is this decade of healthy aging? Why it is so important? This decade started last year, from 2020 up to 2030. And actually, we address 4 main areas of action. First of all, an age-friendly environment. This is very important all over the world to have an environment. I mean, our city, a city friendly to the people, to have to avoid barriers, to have in house that are friendly to the elderly. We have to start to think about that in all our action. And this also has economic input, because of course to change the environment, making it be, friendly to the elderly means to have an economic input in all of that. Second, combating ageism, because still there is ageism in most of our action. So this is we have to change the way we think about older age, and to change the way in what we act. The other two actions are more related to health, to have an integrated care. This is very important. It's also the economic impact of integrated care is very important. I will mention it right after this introduction, and the long-term care, because in the previous section we saw the epidemiological change with the elderly, and how our society will change in the next few years. So we need to prepare our society to a society that may take care of elderly people. This is so gerontologists are very dedicated to this decade, but in the same time, business people should be very close to that, because I have with me the final report from the European Commission that just mentioned that in 2015 the silver economy sustained over 4.2 trillion of euro in GDP. This is, an incredible amount of money that the business is always more interested in the silver economy. And what is the silver economy dedicated to? We already saw that the healthcare, this is very important, because the expenditure will increase a lot in the next few years for the integrated care of the elderly. But also we don't not only we are gerontologists, we don't only have older people that are unhealthy, that are sick, but we have a lot of people that are healthy. So we have people that live longer, that they are in good shape, people that want to travel. So the tourism will be increasing in the next few years. We need to dedicate tourism to older people. Means to have a kind of traveling that is more adapted to people that are of older age. Also, the expenditure will increase according to this report are the recreation. Tourism is part of that. Culture, because older people, they want to learn, they want to have more culture, and this may also reflect the more leisure time. Also, the furnishing and household items are also important. So everything should change, and we have to dedicate working together, expert in aging like gerontologists and people expert in marketing and business people, because there is an incredible amount of business in the future dedicated to the older people. I stop here because I know that also Susan and Natalie want to say something, but I have here for any question. Natalie.
Thank you very much for that, Mario. I could listen to you all day. Susan, would you perhaps want to expand on some of the key opportunities that you see for both the gerontology community and the business communities coming together in the decade of healthy aging?
Yeah, thanks so much, both Mario and Natalie. Just before I get into this, for those of us who don't know us, just briefly, the Global Coalition on Aging is a network of global companies that are really leading the conversation on aging-related policy. So we're very much in this space and working very closely with the WHO and UN and other partners all around the world. So just building on really what Tina already spoke about in the earlier session, the potential for private sector partnerships is really incredible to strengthen the environment and support for innovation and earlier interventions on areas like bone health, Alzheimer's, vaccines and prevention, vision health, all of those pieces of healthy aging that ladder up collectively to sustaining our functional ability and achieving those UN, WHO goals of really adding more life to our added years. In addition to thought leadership, I think there are really two big ways through which the sector can be engaged and tangibly contribute towards making a difference on the decade goals here. One is from an employer perspective, which was touched on, sort of, thinking about the changes to the workforce. I know George spoke about that. And two, from a perspective, from a business perspective, thinking about the operations and even the connection to business goals. And thinking about this, the first example that really came to mind for me is Bank of America, maybe because it's close to home for me, but B of A offers an interesting case study of how this can look when a company and an employer sort of gets it with regard to aging. For Bank of America, it started with their interest as an employer in a time of demographic change where people are working longer and differently, as we talked about. What are the pieces that change for the employer interest? And quite frankly, how do people stay healthier longer to be part of the workforce longer? Which leads directly to the question, what role did they have as an employer in mediating conditions of aging? For them, for Bank of America, it was largely started with Alzheimer's, but it could be other areas. Is there a role for the employer to screen for health conditions in their employees? This is a question that was really groundbreaking, probably pushing the envelope 10 years ago, but maybe doesn't seem as out in left field now, with COVID. And what might be various things that an employer can do that align with societal goals for healthier aging, and maybe also give them a strategic lever in their business. Like could be, elder care benefits or keeping people healthier longer. It could be screening for NCDs, osteoporosis, vision health, and hearing. So that's how the conversation started at Bank of America and how they came to engage on aging really actively. And then the second piece here was, for Bank of America and for other businesses is how can a strategic approach to aging be embedded in the business model itself? For them, it was training their financial advisors. GCOA has a paper on this, which is not shown in these, but there's also a great piece on it in the Harvard Business Review. So it really was, I think, game changing. Bank of America recognized that longevity is a mega trend that should have influence on their business model and have impact on them as an employer and the relationship they have with other employers whose 401ks they manage. They did the analysis, and so they really started doing things together to shape the external environment and identify specific things that would be employee driven and give them a competitive edge. They were, I think, the first financial institution to have a gerontologist as part of their staff. They then partnered with the University of Southern California to create a training program for their financial advisors, specifically to help them better understand the needs of older adults, recognize the warning signs of cognitive decline, and understand what questions to ask and how to handle potentially difficult situations, which, when you're dealing with family and money, were many. I think what the experience and quite frankly, the success of BNFA can show us is how gerontologists can be engaged as really valuable business partners. Gerontologists can advise companies interested in doing things differently on the basis of longevity, either as an employer or from a strategic commercial point of view. So, they're a great example of this, but it also takes a really forward-thinking company to open the door here to see this opportunity and to see the need. So I think this is both the opportunity and a challenge before us as a group. How do we create the environment and connect with businesses to open up this kind of collaboration? So another case study I just briefly wanted to offer was GCOA's own business principles for the 5-generation workplace, or age-friendly workplace, as we had initially called it. This is sort of a flip side case study. This is an example of how challenging it can be to get traction inside companies, even those that get it. We partnered with a few of our members to draw up a set of age-friendly business principles. It was fairly innocuous stuff, mostly around tackling ageism, endemic in many workplaces, broadly supporting healthy aging goals. But we could not get many of our own members to sign on to these principles, when it came to shove, and we wanted them to kind of put their brand out front on this. Hardly anybody said to me. There was fear in HR, there was fear in legal, even when we went back and sort of reframed these principles really as intentions, still nothing. And something that really failed to launch. And so that's a really clear example of the challenge, some of the challenges before us. There's so many ways and industries and places where this kind of collaboration between business and gerontology would be critical for innovation, in digital health, in user experience, in design, in ESG, as we talk about, in employee retention, and on and on and on. It's a bit of a chicken and egg challenge for us to get things moving. For this reason, I think someone.
Sorry, I'm gonna interject. Sorry to interrupt, Susan. Can Sharon's iPhone, sorry to name and shame, if you could mute yourself, that would be great. Apologies.
Oh,
thank you, Sharon.
So it's a bit of a chicken and egg challenge before us to get things moving. For this reason, I really think it's so great to have this kind of a group dedicated to opening these lines of communication. And now, the decade, we have recognition of this mega trend of aging at the highest levels. And also, and importantly, for all of us, we have a framework around which these cross-sector partnerships can, begin to take shape. And so we definitely, at GCOA, and our members, we definitely see that now is the moment for a group like this. I think also elder care and home care offers, another really important case study of where these partnerships are crucial. I think the very existence of the industry itself is an innovation. So I just was going to pass it back to you, Natalie, if you could talk a bit about this from your perspective at home instead.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that, Susan. So I think it's important to kind of acknowledge that as much as there is an abundance of opportunity within the decade of healthy aging, we can't overlook or fail to recognize that we are also in the midst of a global care crisis on our hands. We're all living for longer, but we simply don't have enough carers, care professionals to meet that demand. There's also, as we all know, strains on traditional healthcare services and delivery models. So it's no secret that we need to think creatively about what the person-centered care of tomorrow is going to look like, which is set forth as one of the goals of the decade of healthy aging. And that's exactly where I think a special interest group like this can share some really useful learning and knowledge from sectors where we've seen innovation and change happen at pace and scale, and alternatively where businesses like Home Instead and many others in this group who are already working within elder care can become a useful testbed for you. I also see there being really real value in the group helping businesses to deepen their understanding of the barriers that are facing our aging population and to facilitate businesses to design services that really put them at the centre. And what I mean by that on a real life example would be for potentially, like the Global Coalition on Aging, facilitating partnerships that make a tangible difference. So thinking about the person at the whole and beyond just their care to everything from their nutrition, their housing, their digital security and their transport, for example. And it's your learning and expertise from different sectors that I think would be invaluable. And just kind of paying homage to the group that went before about thought leadership, I do think there's still a lot of important work to be done around the narrative that surrounds aging. We've all had the birds and the bees chat when we were growing up with our parents or people in our family. Why are we not having the same equivalent, owl and elephant conversation about being sage and wise as we enter a new chapter in a new phase of our life? And I think we all collectively have a responsibility to encourage businesses to have positive conversations around aging and to consider the care needs of their workforce. And I think with that, I just wanted to pass back to Mario to see whether there are any closing comments and to reflect on how we as a group can take forward some of these actions.
Oh, yes. I mean, we have to understand we are going to face a completely different society in next 10 years because the number of people that live alone will change a lot. So people are getting older, people are living alone, they will need help. So home care will be very important. Telemedicine then in general will be very important. But also the society in general should change. I can mention that in Japan, for example, now there are the malls and supermarkets that are age friendly. Means that there are the sides of the things that they sell is just the packet is just for one person, so that single portion, single use. There are underwear for women of more comfort, and there are also a cosmetic brand for older that called the Golden Shop. And there are in the mall there are the doctors and nurses that can help people, and there is a lot of in the sales floor enlargement of the font size of products. So all the society should change to face this incredible change of the number of older people that we are going to have in the next 10-15 years. And this is incredible. Also because what was the number of people that were born after the war, now they becoming older and older, and this is and the number of people that are now the newborn, the children are less and less. So this is incredible number of older and the people that we have to deal with, and older people they don't think they're old. They want to live a normal life, but they need the society and the houses, the market, the cities to change for them. And this is actually an incredible market for and business opportunity.
Mario and Natalie, Susan, I just want to say thank you. A really broad and inspiring exploration. I see a huge burning platform and enormous opportunity and challenge. Can I ask a repetitive question and a more searching question? The repetitive question was really, can you tell us a little bit about the choice for this image? And the other question, maybe the deeper question, more substantive question, was tell us about what you think that the SIG should be doing based on what has been said here. What ideas do you have for the SIG?
So I can take the first question about these two images. There was actually two images, which I thought were just for consideration, but I can see that they were both used. So this first one is, just I think an example of, the group photos, an example of sort of what this can look like in action, which is this is, some of the GCOA team here in New York at the United Nations, along with some partner organizations we had worked with in the vision, health, and blindness space. Both from, an international organization and an Ireland-based organization, along with another sort of activist in the space who's a celebrity chef in the center there. Her name is Christine Ha, who lost her sight, and a senator, I believe, from Ireland. And we had an event that we had co-organized. And importantly, someone from Novartis who had really been, a company that spearheaded this work with us, and really looking at, the rise of preventable blindness as 80% is avoidable, even, it's extremely prevalent in older adults. That's sort of the largest risk factor or non-modifiable risk factor, so to speak, but that there was really not a lot of recognition of this. And so we organized an event called Died in the Dark at the UN for UN ambassadors in order to, raise awareness around this, saying that this should be something that is on the agenda of every country, that this is something that is largely avoidable, huge implications for healthy aging, independence, quality of life. Why are we not doing something about it? And so this is a photo that we took in front of the SDGs, SDG 3 at the UN Plaza. And I just thought it was a really nice example of sort of what this kind of partnership could, yield, those kinds of things that are really advancing these UN WHO goals. And then the other picture was just, some of it's kind of a throwaway, but it's some of the reports that GCOA has done with our members and others that are now on the platform for the decade, the official Decade of Healthy Aging platform, which is, if those are not familiar, is sort of a repository of different kinds of resources for all of the stakeholders in the space to help, really advance the goals of the decade. And that these were things that were insights largely coming from or driven by, businesses in the private sector in those kind of collaborations that are really out there in the real world, hoping to help inform and literally advance, the goals of the decade and recognized as such by the WHO. So
well, yeah, for the second question, I mean, I can start and then I will give the floor to Natalie to finish, to close the section. No, I mean, this is the siege is in a unique opportunity to get together gerontologists and the business people and the fair sector. I mean, here we have myself, Natalie, Susan, we are from three different walls. They are getting together, discussing together, and changing the opinion with the people. So I mean, this is a unique opportunity for BSG to discuss together and get a new idea, a new option for the future of aging. This from Natalie.
Thank you, Mario. I second that. I see kind of the call to arms to this group to be the combined power of our storytelling. Businesses now should have a responsibility to deliver on initiatives that help employees and their wider communities to age safely and well in place. So if we are seeing real life examples of where that's already happening, I think it's our duty to share them within this group and to bring forward some of that good work and to celebrate it.
Well, thank you, Natalie and Susan, and congratulations to yourselves and GCUA for the incredible achievement of securing the Decade of Healthy Aging. I think it's going to set the tenor for all of this moving forward. And Mario, thank you so much. I think you gave us a huge and illuminating context for why this matters and actually the prize to be achieved. And with that, I would ask that we move on to the next section, which is a session that's going to be led by Ian, and I would say is the final product of some weeks, if not months, of preparation by this team. And so I know that we're all very excited.
Rob, thank you so much. By the way, my background was as a clinician and researcher, and also involved in policy. People, Lisa, could you mute, please? I've now moved into applying a business model through a startup to meeting some of the needs of older people. And I'd like to just echo all the comments made by Rob to thank the brilliant contributions from everybody, all 11 people who have contributed so far to this event, and particularly to thank Rob for the huge amount of work that he has put into making this happen. I'd like to start off with some just summarizing some key points that have emerged in my mind following the presentation, and then I'm going to hand over to Jemima Kelly of the Financial Times to ask questions of me and of us as a panel to try and just unpack some of what we've heard today, and then we'll finish our part and move into a final part where I will formally launch this special interest group. So session one, gerontologists working in and with businesses. For me, one of the key points emerged was an existential question right at the beginning. Why would you become interested in aging and older people? And it connected to something George said later about falling in love with the subject. For me, I fell in love with the subject when I was a medical student with my good friend Mario. We were both medical students in Edinburgh back in about 1979, attached to a brilliant geriatric medical service run by a guy called Jimmy Williamson. And like anybody, like most people, until you come across the subject matter, you don't realize the opportunity here. And part of that was I did a night shift as a nurse assistant on a ward for old people, and I was asked to push back a rectal prolapse back into the bottom of this old man who had come out, and I wasn't very expert at it, and it took a long time. But during that time, he told me stuff about his experiences in the First World War that he said he hadn't told anybody, but wanted to get it off his chest before he died. And I just realized that working with old people allowed you to really understand what it is to be human, seeing life from the end of life and looking back on life. And that was one of the reasons that inspired me to follow that career. And I think it's having that visceral experience that actually gets us involved in the subject. Why should gerontologists engage with business? And during that session, I think we learned that it was about the ability to take knowledge and understanding, but then apply it to make a difference. And that connected to the synergy, the creation of the communities that we as a special interest group and our sister organizations are trying to do, creating common communities of interest, where we bring together knowledge and understanding of older people with enterprise that can innovate and deliver change that ultimately meets the needs of older people. It's a big part of our rationale, I think. And then we built further on that, I think, in session 2, what businesses can learn from engaging with gerontologists. And I think the first point was that it's an obvious one, but it's always needs stated. There's lots and lots of old people, and most disposable income and most assets are held now by old people, and that's the market, the so-called silver economy. And unless you understand that market, you're not going to develop products and services that old people need and want. And very telling point about how most marketing departments, if asked to do a market report on the fit between innovation and product to the market, just don't know where to begin with older people other than just the numbers. So there's a huge role for gerontology, to my mind, to play to fill the knowledge gap for business. And then there was something also about that came out of that session that was unexpected, but I think really, really powerful, which is how we need to learn from older people. And part of co-production, co-design is working with older people. A lot of gerontologists have developed great methods for engaging with older people. It's just crazy to think that we would not, as a business, want to really understand the point of view of the older person. But in my career experience, I found age discrimination is pervasive in the sense that because we think, because we know one or two older people, we think we know older people, but we don't. Older people, incredibly diverse, become more differentiated from each other as they grow older than from when they're younger. So we really need to take seriously attempts to really understand that diversity and the real needs of older people, so we can create the communities of interest. And then I think in the third session, we moved up to brilliantly fronted around by the whole team, and Mario's very succinct dissection of what's in the Decade for Healthy Aging, the UN report on the Decade of Healthy Aging, and that provides the framework. And I was sure that for this special interest group, we needed to provide a policy framework for our work. It gives us common purpose, and it helps that it's up at the United Nations level, and it's brilliant. It's really, and for those who haven't had a chance to read it, I suggest you go to some of the reports, which you can get from the United Nations or World Health Organization websites if you want to know more. A second thing which I thought came out of that session that struck me was about the multiple sectors that we're dealing with here. So we talked about the workforce that came up in earlier sessions, workforce, old people in the workforce, younger people in the workforce who might not be able to work because of their caregiving responsibilities, workforce for the care of older people. We talked about transport, and it was interesting to see recently that Uber are getting interested in the care of older people through their division Uber Health. Could be completely transformative in the way we deliver a more person-centered approach to connecting older people to services. Housing was mentioned. Finance, the Merrill Lynch Bank of America case study, hugely powerful. I remember sitting next to a very senior executive at a meeting, the World Congress on Aging from Merrill Lynch Bank of America, who was talking with tears about his own experience of his loved older people. And that, something to remember, all our great business leaders also have parents, grandparents, and experiences of aging. They want to get things right for older people. And many congratulations to Merrill Lynch Bank of America for taking this subject so seriously. And of course, Jemima, who we'll hear from later, is a huge expert in the world of finance and its intersections on society. Health, obviously, care, obviously, but also technology came up, and even retail came up. How should the retail industry change to meet the needs of older people? So this cross-sectoral view, I think, was really important, and how that impacts on achieving the UN development goals and how it impacts on business and the great opportunities for gerontologists to add knowledge and understanding. And how does it all come together? My last comment, really reflecting on what we've heard, is that it can only come together through a person-centered approach to care, which Natalie brilliantly brought us back to in her summing up. You can't think about all of these things, transport, housing, retail, health, care, finance, in isolation of each other in terms of how we respond to the needs of older people. So how do you bring them together? You need some mechanism to bring them together at the level of the individual older person, which is why in the decade of healthy aging, one of the 4 pillars is the person-centered approach to integrated care. So I haven't done justice at all to the depth of the discussion that was created, but I just wanted to pick out these few points, first of all, perhaps to just get a conversation going with Jemima. So thank you.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks everyone for having me. This is all really interesting to me. It's not really an area that I've written about a little bit, and I think would like to write more about this. And in fact, that was going to be my first question. I'm sitting in the FT headquarters in a bit of a strange room, and I'm kind of, it's just occurring to me, I mean, what could the media do because it doesn't, you know, if I pitch, it's not necessarily the sexiest topic, old people, and you know, it's not necessarily clickbait as it gets called. What could the role of the media be in this, and how can we make it more of a kind of exciting topic, I guess, is my first kind of couple of questions.
And these are really challenging, and I would encourage others to put hands up if you want to respond.
I don't know if I've frozen or if you've frozen, Ian, but I can't hear you.
Oh,
my internet's
I'm
gone.
sorry, Jemima. I think we're okay at my end. So I'll pick up on that, and then I'll let Eric come in, who's got his hand up. But well, actually, Eric, you go first. Got your hand up. Do you want to respond to that while Jemima's reconnecting?
I do. I love this topic, Jemima. If you can hear me, this is a really important topic because I think too often media portray older generations in stereotypes. As I mentioned during our panel session, culture hasn't caught up with science. The fact that people are growing older is a miracle of medical science, but it's treated as a problem. Did she go? I've lost her now. I'll keep talking. It's
keep talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the images that we use, the languages that we use, George earlier talked about the image library in the US. AARP, along with Getty Images, created an image library, which begin to address some of the images. But I'd also go back to what George was talking about in terms of the way we sell products and services. Right now, Center for Aging Better did a really good event around ageism in marketing and the way they're portrayed. And I think there's a lot of really good information that's available, but not well disseminated. And I think highlighting some of the work that is being done. But to follow up on George's point, make sure your marketing team is age empathetic. The group Legal in General just completely revamped all of their marketing to get the ageism language out of their approach to marketing. And I think those are the kinds of things that we really need to be picking up. I'll hand over there. It's a lot to talk about.
I'm so sorry, the FT internet just completely cut out. I thought it was you that had frozen. I don't know what happened. Where did you hear me until? I don't know what happened there.
You asked what could the media do, and we gave a really long answer.
Oh damn. Give me the short version. Yeah.
I'll let the next person go, and maybe we catch up later. Yeah.
Okay. But the short version, Jemima, is that remove age discriminatory language and start to communicate about older people as they really are, rather than through the stereotypes. I think is that fair? So, but Jemima, oh, we might have lost her again. But Susan and Alison, she's stimulated.
I'm still.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, I can see you. Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Oh, good.
You've stimulated a lot of discussion. We're going to get Susan and Alison coming in now.
Great.
Susan first.
Thanks so much. I think, that it's such a broad question. And so I think from my mind, it's like, how we don't talk about, one older person or older, there's different pieces of the media. I think for us, in the business spaces, we would love to be able to make more clear and communicate more clearly that, interest in aging and longevity is not necessarily just sort of, a social interest, but it is just really strongly connected to business goals. It's strongly connected to business success and, financial, sustainability, fiscal sustainability and finances, and that from so many different angles, from a company angle, from, to public sector, finances, that there's really important ways to be talking about it when when talking to that particular audience. Obviously, with a different publication, it's going to have a different focus, but there's so many different angles to talk about that I wish, I think it would be nice to sort of get it out of sort of just talking about it as sort of, on the society pages or the sort of soft news, and really understand that there's a really, big business interest here and financial interest here, and would love to see that, and would also, I guess, put the question back onto the media: is how can we help you communicate more clearly? What do you need from us in terms of stories that will work and that will get those clicks and get people engaged, and how can we be communicating in a way that helps you tell those stories in a compelling way?
I think I think in some ways one of the things that ageism doesn't have is it doesn't have the stigma attached to it that all the other isms that are very much in the news have these days. And in some ways you almost want it to have more stigma. You actually want there to be more stigma around aging, and then it becomes a kind of outrage subject, and then maybe you can start generating clicks because people love outrage. Once you get the Daily Mail to start being outraged at the treatment of old people, then it kind of becomes, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a way of kind of framing it. But one of the things that someone said in the session was about like, sorry, and I've realized there are people with their hands up, so I'll give way to the people with their hands up. Sorry, I just realized that.
Oh, no, don't worry, Jemima. But okay, Alison, and then George, and then Jemima can come back.
So Jemima, I used to write for financial publications quite often. And when they found out that I was a social scientist, you could see the cloud, just the blank face coming over. But it kind of resonates to what Ian was saying. of having that conversation with the Merrill Lynch chief exec. We are all human beings, and I think adopting a life course approach, financial advisors no longer manage their clients' investment only. It's definitely a relationship that they're managing. And by adopting a life course approach, talking about the transitions, talking about care responsibilities along the life course, I think just makes it more relevant. And you kind of hit the target where you can combine the financial aspect, but with a holistic real life experience.
I guess the FT is well placed to bring that kind of business, financial, economic benefit kind of argument out.
I mean, one thing in terms of financial planning that I think could definitely have a light shone on it is the financial implications of dementia. I think people don't realize what's covered and not covered, and how do they incorporate that into their financial planning.
That's really interesting.
Okay. Thanks, Alison. George?
So, Jamal, I want to take you up on your outrage point. Now, I'm going to tell you a personal story. It's actually maybe a little bit shocking, but I'm fine with it. And it's personal. So, when you talk about outrage, I think you need to get the right outrage and not necessarily the thing that comes to mind first. So, my late mother, for probably about 10 years, fell and would spend quite a lot of time in hospital. But I think in her mind, she wanted to be at home and would accept 48 hours on the floor and dying as opposed to 6 months in a care home. Now, unfortunately, a chest infection put her into a care home and she was there 4 years. In the course of the last 18 months, she was held effectively in solitary confinement for 12 or 14 of them. So she's someone who couldn't walk, so was on her bed. The only people who came to see her wore masks and brought her food and took her to the bathroom and things like that. And as family, we could only visit her for much of that time in a room divided by glass to talk to her through loudspeakers and microphones, just like a prison. No touch, no contact. And the outrage is that we were outraged that people were dying and we overprotected them and we completely forgot about their quality of life. And the blessing, if you like, of my mother finally passing in the summer was she doesn't have to endure another winter of lockdown. And I think you've got to be really careful about how you do that, because in a way, this outrage over people dying through COVID and having to protect them has actually led to an overreaction. I think we need to be really careful on that sort of thing. So I know that's a personal story. I'm completely over it, so no sympathy, please. But I heard on the radio so many people in the summer saying the same thing. So I felt like I was not alone. In fact, we've probably had a reasonably good deal of it compared to others.
No, I think that's actually something that I discussed with Ian. And in fact, I was trying to write about this and it wasn't deemed a sexy enough topic. And so the column that I pitched about that exact thing was never actually accepted. So that's the issue, that's what I mean. I think it's outrageous how your mother and other old people were treated. And it was like this kind of, this sense that younger people know best when they actually didn't want, that's not how they wanted to be treated. So anyway, I agree, there's a way of doing the outrage. You don't want to
I agree that to create a social movement we need a sense of outrage, but I suppose my message is it's got to be the right outrage. We've got to find the message.
I mean, I'm not suggesting it's necessarily the correct thing, but sometimes you have to go with what's happening. And it just occurs to me as we're talking that maybe we live in such a world of outrage where cancel culture and everything's very censorious and moralistic. Maybe we need to create more of a stigma, so that someone is scared of being ageist in case they get cancelled, which currently there is no stigma. So it's not that I think that that's a good thing, like cancel culture or whatever, but maybe I don't know, it's just a kind of thought. I was also going to ask, someone brought up getting aging on the kind of ESG agenda. And it strikes me, I mean, I remember when I first came across ESG a while ago, and there was much more focus on like the S and the G back then. And now it feels like it's just about the E. And I don't know how you think, Ian, or anyone, that like, how can we, does it need to be, in some ways, I think that because the kind of climate crisis, as it gets called, has become so top of the agenda. And this doesn't get called, again, it's a bit like going back to the outrage thing. This doesn't get called a crisis. Do you think we need to separate them out, Ian?
It's
in business, you know.
Two of the great crises of humanity are the aging of populations and the environmental looming catastrophe. Now, we could make connections, I think, and I think David Attenborough does well as a very old person to bring the wisdom of aging to the environmental agenda. And there's a lovely counterpoint to Greta Thunberg, actually, that we like the two ends of the spectrum. And I think there's even a story there about the intergenerational leadership to tackle the environmental crisis for the sake of humanity. And the other side of it, though, is that if older people are the consumers in society, and consumerism is what drives ecological disaster. But if consumerism can change in its nature and older people have the spending power and older people become advocates of sustainability, there's something there. And I think there's something deeper in that as well, that nearly every older person before they die tries to make sense of their life. They want to say, my life was worth living, the world is a better place for my life. That's what helps old people face their mortality. And many old people have told me that, you know, I'm not afraid of death because I feel there was a purpose to my life. Now, you can't die feeling that you're going to leave the world in flames because of what you have done in your lifetime, and you're ceding that to your children and your grandchildren. So I don't know, Jemima, if there's a story in that, but they are the two existential crises of our age.
Yeah, well, maybe it needs to get called a crisis more, I don't know. So I'll move on to another question. Can we talk about what the special interest group will do to extend? Do you say HALE, or do you just say healthy active life expectancy?
Healthy active life expectancy, yes, it's the key. HALE, people do call it HALE for short in the
sounds a bit like hell.
Yes, many people here are experts, not least George, on this topic. We know that if we add 1 extra year to average healthy active life expectancy in the United States, work done by Andrew Scott, who's the inspiration for Longevity Forum, this Longevity Week that we're in, that would add $50 trillion to the US economy in economic benefit. And I think that is the high level message out of what this group and others can help do, which is bring the business community together with the gerontology community, the people that understand aging and older people from a scientific point of view, and make a contribution to extending healthy active life expectancy. That really will help with the future.
Rob says, if you're interested, please contact Ian. And so, and is there any kind of, I don't know if it's impossible to answer that, Ian, but is there any kind of practical, so you're kind of encouraging businesses to get involved in that, but kind of what can businesses practically do? You know, they can recognize the economic contribution, but what can they, what does that look like, I guess, in real life?
Well, Samsung, recognizing that actually Korea is the country that was going through the most rapid aging demographic shift of all countries in the world 5 years ago. And so Samsung, is one of the major industries in South Korea, decided they had to know aging. So they created, I don't know, it was 100 or 1,000, might even have been 1,000 doctoral studentships in prestigious universities around the world, and they sent their managers to do a doctoral thesis in aging, because they said that will write aging into the DNA of the business for the future.
Do you think that's really interesting? Do you think as well that there should be some like lobby groups that, you know, you have all sorts of lobby groups for, you know, famously recently Stonewall has been in the news a lot, for example, but do you think there should be like some would that be something that you guys might try and, you know, come into businesses and give people training in, you know, aging and how to treat old people? I mean, is that
brilliant?
Yeah,
I think we should look at that, Jemima.
Yeah.
And I'm conscious now that we've probably just got 5 minutes left, Jemima, and you've only got your first 3 or 4 questions out, but fantastic. Let's carry on the conversation with you afterwards, if that would be all right. Jemima, do you have any concluding remarks before we just do our last little bit of this event?
No, I mean, I'm just kind of listening and learning, and well, I have one remark, which is that I did a column last year, which I actually genuinely think could be considered in this. It was an idea that I had because my mum was on a dating app for old people, Silver Singles it's called, and if anyone wants to find her on there. And she was saying to me, I can't go out with this guy, he's like 77 or something. And I said, yeah, but you're 73, you know, he's only 4 years older than you. And she said, yeah, but I'm a young 73, I can't go out with a 77-year-old, he's going to be old. And I said, but that's not fair, he might be much younger actually than a 65-year-old or a 70-year-old or whatever, but actually because he's got that number. And I said, why don't we, once you've gone past a certain point, shouldn't we take your life expectancy and count age backwards from there? Because actually that could also, and I actually genuinely mean this, it could actually do some kind of wealth redistribution, because the poorer people who have lower life expectancies get more support at an earlier age. So that's my concluding wacky idea, is that we need to stop counting age upwards at a certain point in our life and start counting downwards from life expectancy.
Brilliant. And actually, it's the best definition of how old you are is how many years you are away from death, from average life expectancy. That's how we should regard our age. And we can do tests for that. We can do body, brain and face age tests, for example, that give us your average compared to other people in the population based on life expectancy.
Wow.
And we could give lots of old people their indices. And we can also, it's malleable. Through behavioral change, you can actually increase your life expectancy and you can increase your power on your dating app as well. So fantastic stuff. Thanks, Jemima, so much.
Very much.
Thank you. And I'm just going to turn now to, I think we've got about 5 minutes before we close, but so just a few words from me and from Rob. The mission for this special interest group, you can see it on the screen, but essentially we are bringing our two communities together for social purpose. And that common purpose really is to help every older person, which I think is sexy. If we think about looking after our older relatives, I think most people don't want to regard themselves as old, but they do care for other older people. But just as we do know some older people, it doesn't mean we know every older person. And we need the gerontology community to help with that. And just because the gerontology community, more than any other community, deeply understand aging and older people, they're not able to implement that knowledge and understanding without business. So I'm just hoping that our special interest group will bring together and working with our brilliant sister organizations that have contributed to this event, we can provide the mechanisms to bring gerontology and business together for the benefit of all older people and for ourselves. And thanks again to Rob for your brilliant work pulling together this event. And I'm going to hand over to you to just let people know how they can get involved in our work in future. Thank you everyone for attending this event and contributing.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Jemima, and also thank you to all of our speakers. I wonder if you guys could all come on screen so everybody can see your lovely faces. And I think the point to make here is that I think the main conversation that we've been having is about the need to collaborate, to build the village that is going to create the change. And we hope that the SIG that is being launched today is a vehicle to make a contribution to that. And with that in mind, this will only be successful with your participation. And so we'd like to sort of mention that in the coming weeks, we will take a much deeper dive into these 3 issues that we have discussed and explored today. We would like to invite you to 3 workshops, of which we have one with a firm date and others where we will be able to let you know the date. So the first will be around empowering social gerontology, which will be January 2022. The second, which is a date that is scheduled around Wednesday, the 23rd of February at 5 p.m. We'll be supporting business to better understand older people and aging. And then our third workshop will be enabling the WHO Decade for Healthy Aging, and we hope that that will take place in March. Some of the faces that you've seen today presenting on these topics are working now to make those workshops inclusive, I would say insightful, and a vehicle where we can learn as part of a wider agenda for the SIG to move through to sharing our experiences, our insights, and the information and learnings that we've gathered, both at the national and international level over the next couple of years. So please join us and be part of the special interest group. And if you'd like further information, please contact Ian Philp, our chair, Ian at agecaretechnologies.com, or myself. I'm Rob Walton. I know I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. Here I am, and I'm the deputy chair, and you can find me at robwaltonuk@gmail.com. And with that in mind, I'd like to thank you all for coming to see us today. It's been lovely to exchange and engage and learn, and we hope that it's the first conversation of many. Thank you very much, and goodbye.